Hello everyone. In this session, we're going to be looking into the fundamentals of SQL or SQL as other people call it. We'll be using MySQL Workbench. And if you haven't installed it already, you can follow the guide that we have in the description box to install it. Now we're going to start by getting familiar with the MySQL Workbench interface, then move into creating a dummy database for the Ministry of Health Kenya, which you'll then use to create, manage, and execute different SQL queries. By the end of this session, you should have an understanding of the basic SQL queries and how to use them to interact with the database. Now, before we proceed into opening our MySQL Workbench, it is important for us to understand what a database is, what MySQL is, and what a relational database management system is, and how we can use MySQL. Now, a database is a collection of information organized in a structured way for easy retrieval, management, and manipulation. SQL is an open source relational database management system, and a relational database management system is a type of database management system that stores data in a structured format using rows and columns. Simple as that. MySQL helps us in different ways. One is in SQL development, and here we can use the SQL Editor to run SQL commands and also interact with the servers. We can also use SQL for data modeling. And data modeling is like drawing a map for your data that shows where your data is coming from, how your data is moving around, and where your data is going. And then we also use MySQL for server administration. And this is just simply for managing your MySQL servers, adding users, updating users, deleting users, and all those functionalities. And then we can also use MySQL for data migration. And this simply means to move data from one database management system like Microsoft SQL Server to MySQL. We'll move forward and open MySQL Workbench. When you open the MySQL Workbench, it brings you to such a screen, which is the home tab, and it's the default screen of MySQL Workbench. On the left side, you see three different icons. The first one is the SQL development module, which is where we're going to be spending most of our time. It has an SQL editor, which we'll be using to create and manage databases. The second module here is the data modeling module, which allows us to model our data according to our needs. And then the last one here is the server administration, where you can manage your database servers and migrate databases between connections. Now we'll go ahead and open our SQL editor by clicking on this local instant MySQL 80. Mine has already been connected to the password, which means when I click on it, it's going to directly take me to the SQL editor. But if yours is not, if you haven't logged into yours before, then you're going to just input your password and go there. So let me click on it. And here we are. So this is what you call the SQL editor. And here we have different panes. As you can see, this is the first pane, which is the navigation pane. This is the second pane, which is the query pane. And then we also have the results pane, which is now the output pane down here. And we also have this object browser, the one that is labeled here SQL additions. And we can just hide this by clicking on here because we don't need it. And now the navigation pane here has come with three different databases that are just database schemas that gives us an overview of what the database structure looks like, and they don't have data within them. So this comes by default, and when we run our commands here in the query pane, the output comes down here and the results are posted somewhere here. We'll see that when we start working on queries. And then up here is the toolbar. We have basic functions for operating on our queries, like this one here is to open a script file. We use this to save a script file. We use this to run all the commands within the query pane. We use this to run just a particular command that is highlighted by the cursor in the query pane. And then we have those other functionalities. Another important one is this one that limits the number of rows that is shown in our output. Now this one, you can, if you had like over 1,000 rows, you could limit to over 5,000 rows and you want to output all of them, you can limit to 5,000 rows. If you have over 1,000,000 and you want to output all of them, you can just put here, don't limit. But I leave it at the default, limit to 1,000 rows. Now up here, we also have other functionalities for working with files. Like now this one is for creating a tab for executing queries. This is for uploading a script file, which we are going to use in a few. And now there's these other ones that you can also check out. Now I'll go ahead and upload our first file that we're going to use to create the Ministry of Health database that we talked about. And then we're going to we're also going to run queries to input data into the tables within the database. Now we'll go ahead and open our file here that has the scripts for creating our Ministry of Health database, creating the tables for the database, and also inputting data into the tables. Now this file has been shared to our GitHub repository, and you can download it by clicking on the link in the description box. I'll go ahead and click the second icon that looks like a folder here, and it brings me to where my commands are, or my SQL files are. And if you had downloaded it to a different directory or folder, you can just navigate to that folder. Now mine is saved on a folder named SQL training, so I'll just go ahead and click on this MOH Kenya SQL and open it. And just like that, now we have our queries here. Now just a quick overview of what these queries do before we go ahead and run them. First query here is drop database if exists, and we've given it a name here, Ministry of Health Kenya. So we're just telling SQL here that in case this database already exists, then we should drop it or remove it to avoid any conflicts. Now the second query here, create database, and we've given it also a name which is same to the one that we just dropped up here. And now this one creates a new database called Ministry of Health Kenya. And the next query here is use Ministry of Health Kenya. Now this one just sets a newly created database as the active one. We are telling MySQL that we want to operate on this particular database. Now we go ahead and create table. The first table here is employees, and here we are defining the structure of the table within the database, and this structure includes the column. Now the columns here, we have employees, employee ID, first name, last name, age, gender, birth date. And then the other thing that we're also defining here are their data types. And you can see for the employee ID, it's an integer. And we say here that it's not null, that it not null just means that it has to exist, that it can't be a null value. And then we also auto incrementing it. This just simply means that when we input a new employee data, we're going to increment the employee ID. Now this data type, this varchar, yeah, we're just telling MySQL that this is a characters, or rather this is a text that we are limiting it to 50 characters. And then same as this one, and then in the age also is an integer, gender is a varchar, and then birth date is a date. And now the primary key that we see here is simply a unique identifier for this particular table or rows. Yeah, it's what uniquely identifies that particular table. And we'll see that you can use this primary key to reference to this table in another table. Now the next table here we are creating here is the employee salaries, and this is simply a table that keeps track of the employee occupations, their salaries, and departments. So here we have the employee ID, the occupation, the salary, and the department ID. Our primary key is also employee ID, and then it's also a foreign key. Now, be careful when using the primary key as the foreign key in areas where we have employees that have more than one salary. But now here, because we assume that every employee just has one salary, so we can use the employee ID as the primary key and also foreign key that references the employees table. The next table we are creating here is the department table, and this one has the department ID, which is also the primary key here, and the department name, and we also have the data types there. Now, something else about foreign keys before I move on is that foreign keys are what we use to refer to a column that is in another table within the same database, so that we don't have to keep writing the same data every other time in every other table. So the other thing here is we are creating a table for hospitals, and we have hospital ID, hospital name, location, and the primary key is the hospital ID. Same thing we do for the table, the patient's table, patient ID, first name, last name, age, gender, admissions, discharge date, and then hospital ID. And now we have the primary key and the foreign key. Now the next queries are where we're inserting data into the tables that we had created above. The first thing we want to insert is employee names and their genders and age and birth date. And here we are starting by inserting, these are 4 employees, and then the syntax is just insert into, and then table name, and then now you give your column, the column headers, and then now you insert the values just like that. And we do that for also the other areas of the tables, and that is it. So we'll go ahead and run our queries, and we use this command, and now you see the output here. And now if we refresh our schemas here, you see that the Ministry of Health Kenya database has been added, and it has the different tables that we've created as well. So the next thing we want to do is we want to query this database. We can go ahead and bring the file that contains our queries so that we can start querying this database. I'll just come back here, then open this commands.sql file, and the link for downloading these queries is also provided in the description box. Now, the different queries we want to look at here are select and from clauses. We have the where clause, join clause, order by clause, group by clause, having clause, and the limit clause. Now we're going to run them one by one. I'll just open a new tab here, and the first thing we want to start with this select and from clauses. So let me just copy. So the select clause specifies the columns to be retrieved from the database, and then the from clause specifies the table from which to retrieve the data. Yeah. So we want to select all from the employees table, and then to run that, let's just click here, and yeah, our result is here for us. So remember our data, our table, we had inputted just 4 employees into the table. So we have John Doe, Jen Smith, Emily Jones, and Michael Brown. Next thing we want to do is look at to filter the employees table to where just one particular condition is met, and we want to look at and this brings us to the where clause. And the where clause filters the records based on a specified condition. Now we want to select all from employees where gender equals to female. So let me just copy this and here, and then I just want to run this alone, and we have that. So we have just 2 female employees, that is Jane and Emily, and you can see here that the gender is females. The other command we want to look at here is the join clause, and the join clause combines rows from 2 or more tables based on a related column between them. And normally, before we get into the queries, normally in instances where we are combining 2 or more rows, we need to refer to specific tables where we are referencing their column names. And that is why here you see we are selecting E from first name, we are selecting E dot first name, E dot last name, D dot department name. And in the from, of course, we specify that we are selecting from employees E. Now this E is what we call an alias or alias, whichever you prefer. And this is because we were using the alias because if we were to write employees dot first name, employees dot last name, employees dot department name, our query is going to be too long and too crowded. So that is why we shorten it to just E. But now you have to make sure that here you indicate that from employees E. So the join clause is used to combine rows from 2 or more tables based on a related column between them. And so here we are selecting, let me just copy the query, Control C here. And so we are selecting all. Let me push this down. We are selecting the first name, last name, and department name from employees, and then we are joining it to employee salaries, which we have aliased ES on employee.id, or rather where the employee ID from the employees table equals to the employee ID from the employee salaries table. And then we join department D on employee salaries ID from the employee salaries table, where it equals to the department ID from the department table. I hope that makes sense. So let me just go ahead and run that. And yeah, so we have that. So we have here, our result is here. We have the first name, last name, and department name. And that is what this particular query is giving us. Now the next command we want to look at here is the order by. And the order by clause is just to sort our results in either an ascending order or a descending order. And from our example here, we are sorting, or rather ordering by last name in an ascending order. So let me go ahead. Let's run that. So here what you're doing is you're selecting the first name and last name and age from the employees table, and we are ordering them by the last name in ascending order. And now you can see that now in the last name here we have it ascends from A to N. When you say ascending order, we refer to from A to Z. In descending, it's from Z to A. That is if it's in text. If it's in numbers, it's going to be ascending order. It's going to be from the smallest to the largest, and vice versa. So here you see that B, we have Brown, and then we have Doe, then we have Jones, and then we have Smith. So that is it. We move on to the next command, which is the group by clause. And now the group by clause groups rows that have the same values in specified columns into summaries rows like count, sum, average, etc. Go ahead and just copy this query and run it here. So here we have, so we are selecting the department name from the department's table, and we are counting the number of employee IDs per department. And then of course we are now, this as just means we are naming it, we're giving it a new column name. This is number of num employees. And then we're doing that from the employees, which we have aliased E. And then we are joining employee salaries on E.employee ID, where the employee ID from the employees table equals to the employee ID from the employee salaries table. And then we're also joining the department, where the department ID from the employee salary table equals to the department ID from the department's table. And we are going to group by the department name. So that is what we have here. And now we have our output, where we have the medical department, we have the nursing department, we have the administration department, laboratory department, and each one of them has just one employee as per the data that we had inputted into our tables. Now the next command we want to look into is the having clause. And the having clause is used to filter groups based on a specified condition. It's similar to where, but then now this one works just for groups. So I'll copy the query. Let's run it. Awesome. Now it returned nothing, because all the departments have just one employee. Yeah, and here we are specifying that we want to get departments that have more than one employee. So if you check here, now we have having count, where the employee ID from the employee, and we are grouping them into departments, and we're looking at where we have more than one employee, and now that is null. So maybe we can add an employee to one of the departments so that we see if it's going to output that. So to do that, let's come here and copy this command so that we insert more names into the employee table. So let me just give them Bright. This one is female, let's name them Wambua. This one, let's name them Aching. This one, let's just name them Mike. So this is going to be Mike K. Aching Jones, Wambua S, and Bright Do. So I'll just go ahead and execute that, and we've inserted, as you can see down here, we've inserted that into the employees table. So we can just confirm by checking, and let's select all from employees. Yeah, now you see we have eight employees here. And the other thing we also want to do is we want to effect the change again on employee salaries, because if you look at the employees that we just added here, don't have salaries. Because if you check here from this query that we had just effected salaries for the first 4 employees. You can see that by the employee ID. And the 4 employee IDs that we just added don't have salaries. So we're going to do that. Just copy, come here, and let's just change that. Now the other one stopped at 4, so let's change from 5, 6, 7, and maybe let's make this one also a doctor. Good. Now I'll just go ahead and run this command. Good. Now we can select from all from employee salaries and now see what we have in our table. Sorry, I've written salaries instead of employee salaries. Employee salaries. Good. Now let me just go ahead and run that. Okay, clearly it hasn't affected our changes. Okay, yeah. It's giving us an error here because I duplicated this, but I didn't change it to 8. And we can only have one employee ID. We can't duplicate the employee ID. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. Yeah, and now I think when we run this, we should be able to. Yes, now we have 8 employees. So we'll go ahead and run what we had here, where we were getting the departments with more than 1 employees. So yeah, now we have medical with 3 employees, nursing with 2, and administration with 2 employees. Now we're good to go. We can move on to the next command, which is actually the last one, which is the limit close. And this command just specifies the number of records that we want to return. And just copy here, and let's limit it to just 5 rows because now we have like 8 employees. So let me run that. Yeah, and now you see we've just outputted 5 rows. That brings us to the close of this session. Just a quick recap as to what we've covered. We started by looking at the basics of MySQL Workbench. We looked at the MySQL interface, and then we proceeded to upload our script from our folder here, and then we looked at the different commands that we have within the script, after which we ran the commands to create our database here, which we showed here by refreshing here, and then we proceeded to upload our commands also from a folder within our local machine, and then we proceeded to look at the different clauses within our commands here and run those clauses to try query our data. Then we did that to look at what our database looks like. Now that brings us to an end. If you found this session informative, we ask you to support what we do here by liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thank you and have a good day.